I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us a guest we haven't had on in a while. He's a brilliant guy. He worked the better part of 10 years for Microsoft. They flew him all over the world as a contractor to fix the hard stuff that people in the company couldn't fix. I'm talking about Clif High at halfpasthuman.com with his predictive linguistics. Now, Clif High, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Oh, this is cool, Greg. Thanks so much for having me come on in.
Well, your latest report is coming out Sunday morning in the AM, and this is going to come out Sunday evening. But basically, it's about finance, politics, and cryptos. Oh my! And the short and long-term version of it, right?
Indeed, yes. We're in for a really intense period of time. All of my emotional indicators on my emotional reduction engine on the language are just shooting through the roof. And it looks like a very interesting 2 months in particular, August and September, a slight lull, and then 4 or 5 years of just absolute whipped up chaos, a frappe of chaos.
I want to talk about this, and I don't think I'm being overly dramatic. I mean, I am a student of history. I've been a journalist since the 70s. At no time in my professional career, and at no time in the history of America, has an incoming president came under this sort of attack from all sides, within his own party, within the White House. He's got to fire people outside, the Democrats, the deep state, people in other countries. This is unprecedented in American history, the attacks on President Trump.
You're wrong. Sorry, Greg, you're wrong.
Okay,
but it harkens back to Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party. He was excoriated. They actually had images of him being flayed alive by the other political parties throughout the first 2 years of his administration there, and we know how it turned out. It was kind of okay, but this is indeed a strange period of time, Guy, because not only do we have, or let me put it this way, in my thinking, the political brouhaha that we're seeing now, the attacks, the distortion of everything, are symptomatic of a larger set of conditions that are affecting humanity. And I say this because the politics are not just strange here in USA pop, but we see that they're quite strange all around the planet, no matter where you look, from the Australian corruption to the Chinese power struggles, to the EU degradation, to Russia's forming around nationalism, and to the dynamic split within USA population. It's all symptomatic of these strange energies from space, which are, of course, also coincidentally causing the bursting out everywhere of all these minor wars. And they're also making everybody jittery, if you will, or purifying us around those things that really irritate us, so that's all we can really see. And these strange energies from space have been predicted in our reports for years as part of the sun disease stuff. And the good news is they're going to start slacking off soon. In fact, they should be on the waning process by the time we get to February of next year. And we should see some noticeable ratcheting down, I think, as of November. So theoretically, I mean, if indeed I'm correct that the strange energies from space are the causal aspect of our current conundrums, then the whole thing should ease off and the tension relax sometime over the end of the year. Doesn't mean that we're going to get, birds singing, sun comes out, peace, and everybody's happy. Rather, it just means it won't be quite so intense, and you won't be feeling it constantly on your back all the time. But indeed, we're all reacting to external energies that are affecting us as humans, both individually and, even worse, collectively.
What do you think of this big sanction vote in the House and the Senate, where, I don't know, 530 out of 535 voted to sanction Russia on a totally bogus story? Now we find out that Seymour Hersh says, oh, hey, those leaks came from Seth Rich, the murdered DNC IT staffer. So what do you make of this big sanction against Russia? They say that the U.S. has touched off a full-blown trade war. Russia does.
Russia is correct. The trade war has been an aspect of our linguistics for, I don't know, maybe a couple of years as our system started getting towards the hyperinflation period. I'm not particularly concerned about the buffoonery and actions of Congress because I see them as becoming or obsolete. And so they're going to be displaced, discarded, and basically ignored as we go forward. So in one instance, this is purely symptomatic of the defensive battle that the progressives are having to fight as the structure that they had built continues to crumble and their power base erodes. They have to do anything they can. They're doing anything they can to put their energy towards trying to regain their position, and they are unaware that that energy is being misspent and wasted because there's no way they can regain their position. So they're going towards an illusionary goal. And then in addition to that, the actions that Congress is taking on behalf of the, let's say, the progressive cabal, that the crime family that has run the U.S. for the last 40 years, those actions are Congress is part of that crime family, and they're taking these actions at the behest of the Dawn or the criminals in the family. But in our data sets, it's like they don't really come to much, and there's a whole lot of real world evidence or sort of like proof of concept that's going to suggest that I'm going to be correct. So in other words, here we are as a failing state. The basically all of the Western republics are now failing states. We're in so far in debt that we can't ever recover, and so our ability to trade is weakened anyway. And yet we're going to launch a trade war with Russia. I mean, this is a lot of really smart thinking there, fellas. And then on top of that, we've got this giant move of the as the dollar dies and keeps shrinking, it's got to go in somewhere, and it's coming into the cryptocurrencies, and they're expanding. So at the same time, they're trying to crush or use this aspect of things as their trade lever, their weapon. This one over here is growing like mad, and to the point where we just don't care about their sanctions on trade. It's not ever going to stop any kind of cryptocurrency trade. If I wanted to do business with Russians now, I could do it, and the government would have no way of knowing about it. A, because they're not savvy to what's going on, and B, because they don't have the talent to be able to even sniff on ether, to be able to see where, in a general sense, geographically, I might be sending my ETH coins. And so I could hire somebody in Russia today, and no matter what the sanctions were at this moment, and be quite safe in doing so. The guy would get the coins, he would be able to translate it into local value. Our Congress would be none the wiser, and so much for their trade sanctions.
I want to talk about the U.S. dollar. It is down. The USDX is down. It was in January. It was 103 or 4 of January this year, and now it's down to 92 and change. I mean, that's a big hit for 6 months for the U.S. dollar. Is that what you're talking about? The dollar is dying? Let's just talk about the dollar. Why is it dying, and much farther is it going to go down?
You're referencing it going down against a basket of other currencies, other paper. So that's a meaningless reference. Okay, the dollar
still going down.
It is going down, and the best proof of that is Bitcoin. And so if we were to look at Bitcoin at the beginning of the year at, I think it was like about 1,000, and now it's at about 2,800, well, that gives you your actual measure of real inflation against the dollar, how bad the dollar is dying. And so my data sets have Bitcoin at 13,800 by February of 2018. Should that be accurate, then you can imagine, then I think that's a good definition for hyperinflation, because we would go from today's price of whatever it is, 2,700, 2,800, up to 13,800 by February. So we're looking at, say, 4 to 5 times multiple in almost as many months. That's a real good definition of hyperinflation, and that shows you why the existing power structure, including Congress at all, are really worried, unable to cope. Their incompetence is showing, and all of their criminality is showing, because they no longer have the dollars to pay to cover it up. And the reason they don't have it is because the dollar has no purchasing power, and anybody with any smarts is getting out of the dollar.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. And what about, gold and silver have, well, particularly gold, but silver is still languishing in the $16, $17 range. I know you've called for silver to go up in
600.
$600. You think silver will
Yep.
go? Talk about
Oh,
gold and silver.
it'll
What?
actually go higher than, they'll both go higher than that, Greg. Sorry. I mean, this is really something that gets you all whipped up here, but
Uh,
the
uh,
silver next year will just be taking off as though it was rocket fuel.
Why is it being held down now? I mean, gold is at, I don't know, 1260 or 70 or something like that. Silver's at 16 or 17. I mean, this is a deal, right? Right now for gold and silver.
Correct.
Why? What's going on? What's going on? Tell us what's going on.
Okay, well, you have to be careful of gold, okay, and there's another reason for that. But for silver, they've been suppressing silver because it's people's money. It's been suppressed in the United States since the fall of the greenback dollar after the Civil War. That's when they had to start suppressing the actual price of silver in order to be able to float the many private currencies that were out at that time. So people don't understand that the plethora of plethoras, as my friend El Guapo says, of currencies that we've got now is nothing new. In the 1800s, there were private banks issuing private currencies that were regional, local even, and we might have had several hundred currencies at any given time for decades, and no one really kept track of what was going on. It was all interbank dealings, but it was very similar to what we have now, and it was essentially a power vacuum. The greenback dollar had been, which was the dollar that had funded the debt for the Civil War here,
Yep.
had
They
had
blew it
been
up.
correct, had been blown up, and it was debased to nothing. And we're almost at that stage now with the US dollar. It has been wasted on wars and attempting to create empire. Our empire is dying, just like the British Empire is dying and died. And it's like, hooray! I think it's great that the empire goes away. Empires are stupid. And at the moment, the dollar is our metric by which we've been inculcated into measuring reality, and that's rapidly changing. So I actually have to stop and think occasionally because I'm taken aback because I don't think in dollars anymore. I think in terms of Bitcoin, ETH, or other cryptocurrencies in terms of relative value of stuff. Now, gold and silver are very interesting because they were our lifeline. So for approximately 6,000 years, silver has been money. For maybe 5,000 years, gold has been money. Both of these things are still money, but they're not really efficient money in today's world. So they're very efficient money where there's no communication. And to do a real trade, you've got to get on a train and go from Seattle to San Francisco and have value with you when you arrive at San Francisco. And they're inefficient in that sense because someone could bop you over the head and take your gold or silver and you'd be left with nothing. And so the promissory aspect of checks and paper currency arrives where you can put it into a bank in one area, go to another bank and get it out of that bank. And we're sort of in that area now, only we've gone digital. And so we need the speed of transactions. And so what's going on with gold and silver is they've lost. There's been a new invention in 2009 by Satoshi Nakamoto, and that was the digital currencies that we're dealing with now, which actually have an edge over gold and silver. And so gold and silver have been supplanted as our money, our currency going forward. They're still going to have store of value potential in gold, and silver will become far too valuable to use in any monetary sense at all, simply because we're going to need it for all these cool technologies that are going to be developing over these next couple of years. And so silver will become extremely expensive, and you'll see people that will just gladly go and dig out the old silver plate in a few years. We're going to have to go through the monetary silver first and those silver hoards. But once those are gone around 2022, people will be scrambling and digging up old silver plates and everything, and quite happy to take it down to have it electrically peeled off of the other metals, where they might be getting several thousands of dollars an ounce for silver at that point. But at that point, we might be seeing Bitcoin $500,000 or greater. And it has more to do with the death of the dollar than the value of Bitcoin, but the value of Bitcoin is far superior to gold and silver because of its ability to transact seamlessly, transact across digital networks, and to transact anonymously or nearly so. And to also, by the way, have an absolute irrefutable ledger or account that can't be fiddled. And so we've lived in all of my life, I've lived under the USA military industrial complex empire, which is built on secrecy and lies. And Bitcoin is not a coin that really supports secrecy and lies, and it's going to be really difficult to use those things or any of the cryptos to do much of the criminality that we see going on these days. And so that whole layer of society, which I consider to be a waste on our activities, is going to be stripped away simply because we can't afford it anymore. And it's really coming down to that. It's like we've got a huge potential right on the edge of Renaissance. New things are happening right and left. It's quite exciting if you're in that space, and it's very terrible if you're in the other space where you're trapped by the dying debt system and you don't see any way out of it. But we can't afford the dying debt system anymore, and like I say, a lot of smart people are getting out of it.
You brought up gold, that gold wouldn't be, silver's going to be very expensive, but gold's another thing. What about gold? What's the big downside with gold?
There's too much of it. There's too much of it. There's giant quantities of gold, huge amounts of gold all over the planet. If you looked at Buckminster Fuller's assay in 1930 to 1936, I think it was, the percentage of the Earth's crust that he came up with that actually has yieldable gold was about, I think, 40 times the estimated gold reserves at that time. And we know more now, and so we can refine that. We think it's 80 times more gold on the planet than we thought in the early 1900s. So Bix Weir is quite correct. The Grand Canyon's probably stuffed with gold. They probably got so much gold hidden in the Vatican. Well, let me put it this way: that I think at some point there actually arose the concept of we've got to control the scarcity, very much like the De Beers diamonds cartel trying to control the perceived scarcity of diamonds. And we now know diamonds are quite plentiful around the planet and shouldn't be worth anywhere near that kind of money that they're charging for them. And we're just in a situation where there's so much gold that it's not, the scarcity value was its real claim to fame, and that goes away. Well, what have you got? A pretty interesting yellow metal that's quite malleable, that is almost as good as silver as in conducting electricity, and is unique on the planet in that it has one stable isotope.
Relative to all the dollars printed, though, it should be much higher than what it is now. That's what you're forecasting.
Yes, it should be higher if there is demand for it, and that's going to be the problem, Guy. No one, I can't see my wife lugging a sack of gold coins out shopping, right? And I'm certainly not going to go down and try and put gasoline in to the car with a bunch of gold coins. We're used to the plastic. We're used to the digital translation of our wealth into goods, and I don't see that going away. If it does go away, that would be a quite horrific time. And yes, gold would escalate in value extremely briefly to a very high amount, and then it would go crashing to zero. The reason it would crash to zero is because unless you could take the gold to a central market somewhere, it would only be worth the can of beans you could trade it to your neighbor, that kind of thing. So its value is entirely based on the scale of how far you can move gold around the planet. If we have a planetary gold market, it's up there at the moment around $1,200 because it's suppressed. It should be 2 or 3 or 4 times that. Our data shows it'll be around $4,800, somewhere in that neighborhood, by the time that Bitcoin is at $13,800. But the demand for gold over the long-term data does not show growth. People just won't want the stuff.
But would you be a holder of gold anyway? It's just
Oh, sure. I like this stuff. It's got interesting properties, and it's a good store of value, at least for the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, especially against the U.S. dollar, because the U.S. dollar is dying. So if you're buying it with U.S. dollars, that's a good trade. But
you'd focus, if you're going to go into the metal, you'd focus on silver. Silver's going to go crazy.
Because of its industrial use, to hell with its monetary use, it has some very, very, very unique properties that they're just now teasing out in the laboratory. So, for instance, I'll give you a hint. I happen to know of some people that are now in the process of being able to take silver wire of a fineness that is like subhuman hair, and then they through a process that I can't describe, they make this hair separate into a continuous matrix or lattice work, if you will, that has some dimensionality to it. And so they can take a silver wire the size of a human hair or slightly smaller and make it into a multi-frequency carrier of
Wow.
phenomenal capacity. So it's actually better in this expanded form. It's not really expanded, but in this whatever, I don't know whatever the word is for it, but it's better in this form than fiber optic in terms of carrying discrete frequencies.
Cryptocurrencies, back to that briefly. Well, we're all talking about that. But I was reading on Zero Hedge about how it looks like they're going to have a Bitcoin ETF. And when I told you that, you started giggling and said, ha ha, just like
Oh,
that.
that's so funny.
Okay, tell me about the Bitcoin ETF, because evidently that's going to be a scam.
Well, it is a scam to try and keep control in the money centers. It's also a sop to the many requests that the hedge funds and these guys are getting to get involved with with Bitcoin and cryptos by their clients, especially the older clients that don't want to deal with actually owning the Bitcoin themselves. And then the idea of an ETF is quite scary for me, especially tied to Bitcoin because of the fractal patterns that I've seen in Bitcoin's rise and fall in US dollar terms, and because I know that that fractal pattern is going to continue for a while. So we may well see, for instance, on the route to 13,800 next year, we may well see Bitcoin in the 62 or 6,200 range to say the 7,800 range. And it may take a 50% hit in terms of US dollars over the course of many days that might last a week. And in that week, it might be highly volatile within that range. So an ETF is not going to dampen down that kind of activity when everybody in the ETF is screaming sell when the values of their retirement holdings or whatever are suddenly plunged 50%. ETFs make sense if you want to have an exposure to a very stable kind of a thing like gold or silver, and where the prices vary in a minute fashion. It doesn't make any sense at all when you've got
Right.
crocodile teeth going on, right?
Right. And back to gold and silver. I mean, how long can they suppress silver? Obviously, $16 an ounce is something like mining cost. Gold at about $1,200 an off is right at mining cost. Both gold and silver are trading, maybe gold a little higher than mining cost, silver trading for about mining cost. How long can they keep this suppressed? When does the cork come out of the bottle and poop, and they both take off? Both of them.
What we've got in our data sets is that silver is going to be set free by the cryptos first. And what actually is going to happen, and our data sets said that it would occur in July, and now I understand why the data pointed to July as that being the initiation point, even though it's not yet public. And that is because over the course of June and into July, a number of organizations were created or formed or solidified that are all working towards a crypto encapsulation of the performance of energy necessary to extract and deal with silver. So basically, it's not silver backed, it's not a silver commodity coin, it's something different. And these things will be appearing over the course of this year. The first one and two of these are going to break silver loose at its fiscal restraint level, because these guys will be providing a vehicle around the control structure of the US dollar and the derivative stuff, the COMEX, the LBMA, all of this kind of stuff, because that really is this all-enveloping envelope around the price structure for gold and silver, because they control it through those large contracts. This, again, is very much like the idea of the sanctions, trade sanctions. Who cares what the LBMA or CME is going to say about the price of silver if you've got a silver-based crypto, which is not an ETF, which has direct exposure to silver, and in which it's freely traded globally, and at which will be focused on industrial use. So what I'm actually leaking here is prior knowledge from our data sets that there are cryptos out there that will be silver focused, that will be designed to be used to facilitate silver into industrial use. And so these cryptos are going to be highly sought after by manufacturers in India and China. And
they will therefore be able to control actual silver. They can actually cash it in for actual silver. That same thing's happening with gold right now. They have a crypto gold coming off. I think Andrew McGuire is out talking about how they've got a crypto gold currency. Same thing.
Yeah, but no, not the same thing. And here's the problem.
Okay.
The idea of a gold-backed currency is subject to okay, so basically the difference is when you have a gold-backed currency or crypto, you want that gold stable. You want that gold sitting in a vault somewhere. You want it encapsulated. You want it identified. You want it there. Okay. Now the silver deal, the silver is dynamic. It's over here desperately trying to get the silver, move it into a manufacturer. The crypto is entirely about the flow of silver, not holding it. So here's the difference. So say a government gets ticked off. Say a government has got a really failing currency. Say a government is like Venezuela, where they're holding the opposition party at gunpoint, where they've got, the cojones to be out and out bandits. Well, that government may decide we want that gold. And so they send the army to go get your gold. There's nothing you can do, and there's nothing that crypto can do to prevent external seizure of that gold by a sovereign entity. And so there's no such thing really as a gold-backed crypto at that stage, right? If there's any ability to seize it legally or extra legally, then you own nothing in that stage. And so I'm not a big fan of any of these commodity-based cryptos that are out there or that are coming
because the commodity can be seized because the commodity can be seized.
And we had the situation of warships from a nation in port in another nation being seized by a hedge fund guy a few years back for failure of a bond from that originating warship's nation. So if that kind of crap's going to go on and the law is going to allow that, your gold is not safe. And I've heard all the schemes about how they're going to do, store the gold this way, that way, but it doesn't matter because they can all be seized. Now, the silver cryptos that I'm aware of are not about storing silver. They're not about silver as a monetary unit at all. They're about silver as a desperately needed industrial commodity, and they're there to facilitate easy access to the supply, a consistent supply, and a realistically priced supply for the manufacturers so that they can budget and make their plans, etc. And the crypto, at least the couple that I'm aware of, are going to offer a way of like sort of flattening out the availability issues, even against rising nominal and notional value or dollar numeric representation in fiat currency. So even as the dollar value of silver goes up in Australia, the Chinese manufacturers won't feel stressed because they've got their crypto, which is basically going to supply them 1 unit of silver regardless of its fiat price.
Got it. And with gold, if it gets cheap enough, I remember back in the 80s when gold was, I don't know, $200-300 an ounce, or was it the 80s? The 80s, 90s, they had, like gold-plated connectors. And then that all went away when the price went up. Could we get back to where gold is being used in an industrial setting if the price is competitive with silver?
We may well, but that would be on the other side of like 2024. There's a bunch of other issues coming relative to science breakouts within our data sets that suggest that we'll be on a new path industrially based around energy manipulation in the early 2020s that will yield the ability to do some economically feasible creation of materials out of energy in about 2024. And from that point on, the ability to, or the need to mine and spend our time digging stuff out of the ground and refining it and all of that starts disappearing fairly rapidly with the economic, the industrial economics of scale.
Okay, and then I want to get into the predictive part of it. That are you thinking? A lot of people are warning of big players, and this is probably being reflected in your predictive linguistics in your data sets, where you get billions of pieces of information. So a lot of these pieces of information are probably getting in there. But Jeff Gundlach, a big time hedge fund, a big time money manager, is shorting the market. Bill Gross is talking about a recession. Paul Singer is worried about the global economy, worried about all the debt. The debt is just unbelievable. We went from 160 or 70 trillion in the world to 230 or 40 trillion. We grew the debt by nearly 70 trillion since 2008. I mean, we got a debt bubble, a massive one. That's pretty for sure, no doubt about it. You don't have to argue over that. What's going to happen with this massive debt bubble, and do you see something happening this fall?
Sure. Actually, we're going to be into it in August. Hang on, it's the smoke getting to me here. Yeah, also, we have to throw into the debt all of the derivatives, because all of derivative objects, and which is into the quadrillions, they're all simply debt structures of one form or another. And what we're actually witnessing, as I stated earlier, is the outflow from the dollar-based system over into the new economy as part of this economic and renaissance. And it's more than economic, it's science and everything else. The whole structure of our society is undergoing a huge change from the bottom up, much of which is probably going to be influenced by these strange energies from space, which are going to start calming down in terms of the agitation, and maybe they'll make us smarter or something when they ease off. But in any event, the debt bubble, the debt problem that we've got, that these hedge fund managers and all these people are seeing, is it's real, but it's also to a certain extent illusionary. Okay, so it only exists as long as you only concentrate on things measured around the US dollar. Once you change your metric and stop using the dollar as your doorstop on all of this, then you see that, the economy isn't quite as bad as we might think, but we can't measure any of it. And so, in a sense, it's like I'm all whipped up. I'm greatly excited. I get up every morning with a sense of new purpose and energy because of all of the renaissance going on within the cryptocurrency space that's actually funding new businesses, hiring people, getting things going. There's all kinds of activity in crypto space. But because, like, for instance, a lot of the people that are being hired in crypto space now are being paid in cryptos, you're not even going to see this on any report in which the dollar is the metric that's being used, because it's entirely independent of this. So, for instance, we know from some Zero Hedge articles and others that, there was, I think it was over $200 million profit made in trading Ether coins. And the IRS is absolutely clueless as to who to tax on it. They're not even sure that the people involved were United States citizens, but they can't rule that out. And then they wouldn't have a hope in hell of tracking them down, even if they knew where to start. And so this crypto space, as I call it in my reports, is entirely invisible to officialdom in the main. They know it's out there, but they don't know any of the particulars about it. They don't swim in it the way we do. They don't really know even who all of the players are or what's going on. And so, to a certain extent, any prognostication made by these individuals about the economy and everything focused on a dollar or a fiat currency based metric is illusionary, because it's missing the final outbursts, the long repressed entrepreneurial spirit in the United States, all the Western republics, is bursting out in cryptocurrencies in a way that is necessary, natural, and highly productive, and it's going to be super disruptive as we go forward. Here's the hell of it. Officialdom will one day wake up and see that, 80% of all of the economic activity is not in the fiat currencies we control. Only 20% of the population is even using the things anymore. What are we going to do now?
One of the senators, Grassley, he's got a bill trying to make cryptocurrencies illegal, or trying to go after them for money laundering, things like that. What do you say about them trying to make Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of the other ones illegal?
That's yet another yet another obsolete person mouthing off to no effect. Who cares? Who cares about their laws? Let me explain really accurately. In the crypto world, law, as we understand it, rarely can apply. This is because all of the cryptos are all based on software. All of the interactions of all that software are complete and done when the software makes its connections and does the deal. So those deals that are done in cryptos don't surface insofar as dollars are concerned. Many of them, the only place they touch the dollar system is where someone needs to get some dollars to pay rent or something like this. And so in the main, these people can make as much of this stuff illegal as they wish, but it's very much like thought crime. They can make it illegal for me to think bad thoughts about, the head of the Democratic Party. But that sure as hell isn't going to help, isn't going to stop me, and isn't going to help them find me when I'm having those bad thoughts. So them making a law that way shows their weakness, not their power.
Okay. And what about the speed of Bitcoin? I had Kevin Lawton on, who was a entrepreneur, and I had Warren Pollock on, and they agreed the speed of Bitcoin was pretty slow relative to
Oh, it's
Visa.
atrocious. It's atrocious, guy.
Okay, yeah, so
but you have to understand.
7 per second as opposed to Visa can do 25 to. Yeah, I've heard anywhere from 25,000.
No. That's not okay. That's not a fair comparison at all. Okay.
So, but what about the speed of Bitcoin? What about the speed of transaction?
Okay, speed of transaction on Bitcoin is relatively slow, but it's going to get better because it's software and we fix it. The reason that Bitcoin is not fixed yet is because the politics of the amount of people involved in Bitcoin, and it takes a while to work out those politics for consensus or splits or whatever. And we recognize all of the constraints in Bitcoin, and they're easily solved with the software we have now. For instance, Ethereum suffers from a speed issue that is going to be overcome, but when they implement this thing called the Lightning Network. And even then, that's only an incremental step on what we're going to be going to in the future in terms of speed of transaction and so on. But it's good you brought it up, because here's the reason that the dollar empire is dying. There's so little purchasing power within the dollar that it has almost no ability to circulate. So let me say that it takes us a long time to make or figure out a way to borrow $1 million in order to buy even a reasonably upscale house in any community. And so if that were our metric, then we would say that, it might take me, with a bank, it might take me years to establish credit and then months to get them to loan to me. And so that's my metric on how fast the dollar is moving through that economy. Okay. Now, in a real world, look what happened to my friend. This friend of mine invested in a cryptocurrency. And at the end, I think it was like maybe 46 or 48 days later, this friend of mine sold off a chunk. And this friend of mine had the ability thereafter to buy into his version of this upper middle class house. And so the speed of the wealth factor within the cryptos was shrunk down to that month or so. And so the velocity of money through cryptos has no limits, where it is inherently limited by the mere fact that you're dealing with Visa that is claiming that it's doing all these little microtransactions at tens of thousands of them a second, as opposed to however many per second Bitcoin can do. But Bitcoin is not intended to be the substitute for Visa. Bitcoin has worked its way or evolved into the gold version of a crypto, and it's the store of wealth. Bitcoin is the gateway. It's your gateway into other cryptos. In order to buy Ethereum, you used to have Bitcoin. And then to buy other cryptos, you had to have Ethereum or directly swap for Bitcoin. So it is a transitory, like a software gateway between one network and the other, between the dollar world and between the crypto world. So its function is clearly defined now, and speed is not required. But the speed will change because it's software, and now the community recognizes they've got to do something. We had the Bitcoin fork the other day. Now there's 2 kinds of Bitcoin, and so we can experiment with the new one, and they can make changes with it without intruding on the store of wealth aspect of the old one. And so we get the best of both worlds, and this is all software. So in my world, when I'm looking at one cryptocurrency versus another, and they're claiming that, oh, hey, we're going to be faster, better than this other one, it's like, well, yeah, for 2 seconds until the other one implements the same kind of technology or better, and then you're the laggard. So, nothing is static that way. If we look at the house issue, buying the house, right? Okay, so just on the metric of you've got the money, you've got the cash right now to buy $1 million house. It might take you 30, 60, 90 days to actually execute that transaction because of the people involved. The title company, the real estate people, all of these guys. All right. Now, To do that on a cryptocurrency platform such as Veritasium, I was talking to the CEO yesterday in an interview I did. They've got it down to where they can do that for you in 24 hours, assuming that all of the subsystems, the title, the mortgage if required, insurance, and so on, are preset and ready to go. They can easily do that in 24 hours. And if they really were pressed and everything was perfect, you could do it in a matter of minutes. You could close on a house from start to end in, say, less than an hour. So there's the metric on the level of flow through of wealth within the currency. Now, bear in mind, currency is not really wealth. It's sort of like water that has the wave flow through the water, but the individual water molecules more or less stay where they're at, but the energy goes through. So currency is the ability to transmit energy that allows me to turn my labor into a new house, and it's the vehicle in between it. If we look at the US dollar in that fashion, it's dying. It's clearly dying. Sure, Visa can do thousands and thousands and thousands of debt-based transactions a second, but it could never, ever, ever clear thousands of money-based transactions a second. Bear in mind, what Visa does is it creates debt when you use it.
That's right.
So it's not trying to validate anything. It's not trying to validate anything. It can create as much debt as it wants extremely fast and just assign it to your name. That's all it's doing. So comparing Visa to Bitcoin is like comparing, I don't know, a really fast racehorse to a locomotive. One might get there faster, but could you haul a country on it? No.
And I want to talk about that. Could we have a crash in the dollar-based system this fall? I mean, could we have
we're crashing now. That's the problem, Guy. It's not we're going to have a huge, giant downturn per se. We're crashing now, but we're crashing down in the form of what's known as the crack-up boom. If you go read this von Mises guy, who was this Austrian economist, a contrarian, he said this is how the I can't think of the guy, Kondrativ winter shows up. That when your currency is dying, and we saw this with the greenback. The greenback went into a brief burst of hyperinflation, and then no one would touch it. And so we're in that period right now where we're getting into the hyperinflation of our dollar. And so technically you could see the Dow go 30, 40, 50,000, and it'll be as meaningless as those numbers might suggest. And at the same time, we might see, as I suggest, an individual Bitcoin that might be in the neighborhood of 13,800 by February of next year. And that's just the start. I mean, that's when we launch all of this stuff, is in terms of the crypto explosion into the USA population and society, is February of next year. Prior to that is all like it's the orchestra tuning up, and they're smoothing out the curtains on the play, that kind of thing. They haven't even opened them up yet.
And the pension crisis, I mean, this is the old system, right? Anybody with a pension, any pension, federal, state, local, those people are going to get crushed. They're going to be crushed in the old system. Is that right, or am I wrong?
They are now. They haven't had yield for 30 years as we've been down on this bond curve that's got them down to where your pension does not produce yield on it. So what's the point of having it in the system if you're not getting the 6 or 8% that insurance companies and pension funds require? Then obviously that system is not supporting you. You need yield on that, and that's why the cryptos are so attractive. That's why the cryptos are so attractive to all kinds of old guys like myself, and because they can get yield on the wealth they've been able to create. And that's why the cryptos are also extremely dangerous, because you got old guys out there messing around with technology they don't understand. And the technology it's not super complicated, but it's not simple, and you have to educate yourself step by step by step and be sure where you're at each step and you understand, and then you're good to go and you go on to the next step of it. But it's yield that's driving it all. I mean, look at how starved for yield the entire Western republics are. But if you go into pension systems in Russia, some of the stands, Kazakhstan, I'm thinking of at the moment, pension funds and stuff in those areas are really recovering and have for the last 10 years. And I can think of some investments, the one pension fund I know of in Russia, and they're getting 8.5%. So the holders, the pensioners are doing just fine there. But pensioners over here with IRAs getting 0.5% if they're lucky.
Oh my God! And the war card. Finally, final. We'll just close with this. What's your data sets say for the possibility of a wider war, whether China or whether it's the Middle East with Russia or the U.S. or whatever? What's your data set saying for war?
That there's going to be a lot of minor ones, but no major ones. That is to say, no real giant battle between the U.S. and Russia, no battle between the U.S. and China, basically because the U.S. is a spent force. We would be good for one battle, one major attack, and then that's it. Once we've exhausted our measly supply of cruise missiles, we're done. Now, true, we can go in and stomp the shit out of North Korea. No problem about that. That's a minor war. That's a minor fracas. Our data sets do show that there's nuclear tensions and problems that cause around nukes for the next few years, that we have a real serious issue with these, and radiation becomes a great concern for people. So on an oblique level of interpretation, I suspect there may be one or two nuclear incidents, but I can't say at this stage whether they're through anger or accident. But I do have the data sets saying fundamentally that the waning of the energies that we've been coming out of, or that we've been through, that we're now coming out of, will be palpable to the general public by the end of 2018. And so even the issues of a larger war wouldn't even necessarily be brought up, because everybody would be feeling as though that weren't much of a possibility. Now, on the other hand, I've also got to say that if you live in the United States, you've got this predisposition built in by our education system and all of our media to see the rest of the world as a horrid, terrible place, and we have to defend ourselves with our giant nuclear arsenal. And at the moment, we're really, really, really pissed at Russia, and we're going to have to go to war with them. And all of this is manufactured. And the data sets are suggesting that the money that is used to control the media and manufacture all of this kind of stuff is rapidly waning. Even within the dying of the dollar, it's dying faster, because as the dollar dies, more of it has to be put towards real stuff, because you can't afford the wastage, really, is what it amounts to. And the velocity of the dollar through its own system is shrinking so rapidly that its purchasing power just does not cover a lot of the lies and corruption that it used to. So here's the scenario. Those individuals that are really pushing this anti-Russia pogrom are going to run into a situation of where they're going to find the eruption of revolution within the United States is going to be gnawing at their coattails and dragging them down, as they're trying to redirect our attention to the greater enemy of Russia. But we all now know our greater enemy is these guys, and so the corruption and all of that, we've got to get out of our system. And that's where the energy that they're trying to direct towards war is going to end up going. So we're going to go through a huge, terrible, chaotic period of time, but our data does not show us throwing nukes at Russia.
Trump got it right that the mainstream media are enemies of the people, enemies of we the people. He got that right then, did he not?
He certainly did. There's absolutely no question. They were co-opted so long ago that I wouldn't. If you were working for one of them, we would not be talking.
I used to work for one of them. They would, in order to get approval to have you on, they'd say not no, but hell no. Clif High, who the hell's he? And I'd say, well, he worked for Microsoft, and he was smarter than anybody in the company, and so they sent him all over the world. And no, not good enough. That's what they would tell me. Well, let me ask you about this. One last thing. What means we're on the mainstream media is, Mark Dice and other people, and anybody in the alternative news space, even me, have been noticed big, censorship, lower videos, much lower revenues, which I'm not going to stop. I don't care. Much lower revenues. Mark Dice has been complaining that his revenues have been cut by 80 or 90%. I've had my revenues cut by, in some months, 80 or 90%. I won't stop anyway. But they're talking about banning people. Patreon is talking about dropping people's accounts. They're closing people.
No, they're doing it. They're not just talking about it.
They're doing it. Is that going to be successful? Are they going to be able to kill the alternative media, and why are they doing it?
They're doing it because the political people at the top are still trying to protect their turf, because the legacy media is trying to protect its turf, and because the hang on a second.
Let's see.
because the
Whoops.
dollar is not having its impact. But you have to understand something, okay? The media, the adpocalypse, they call it on YouTube, was not driven by politics, all right? There was an underlying economic reality that hit advertisers, and we saw it about a year before there was any action on YouTube. We saw it with Procter & Gamble yanking all of their ads off of Facebook. And what it comes down to is nobody can figure out how to make money from their advertising on Facebook or any of these social media. And so they had initially thought that it was, from an advertiser's perspective, that it was a giant entrance into Valhalla, that anything you did would turn into many times return coming back to you, just because of the giant collection of what they thought of as their consumers, etc. And so the advertising didn't pan out. It didn't work. So the advertising on YouTube is not successful. And that's why Joe Rogan's income is down 60%. And he's the most famous podcast fellow on the planet. So PewDiePie's revenues are down. And at the same time that the revenues were being dropped by the advertising guys, those that were using this for a political agenda tried to concentrate the remaining advertising for their friends and to disenfranchise their enemies, which is all of alt media. And so we see this as a symptom, but in fact, they've got very little control over it. Their advertisers are still waning on YouTube all the time, and even Google is starting to suffer its own ad revenue downturn. They haven't had growth in so long in their ad revenue. I couldn't say the exact last quarter that it occurred. And at the moment, we're looking at the intensification of that as the shift in the velocity of the dollar drops down another notch, and more stuff is happening in cryptocurrencies. And so you have people that are being dropped by Patreon and all of these other support systems that are centralized, owned by somebody that can be told what to do, and so on. But it's easy for these individuals to just set up an account with a wallet and post their address, as I do on my site, and receive funds via cryptocurrencies from those people that want to support us. And there is no central authority that can shut down that account. It can't be controlled. It can't be monitored. It can't even be found or taxed.
Wow,
So no, the alt media is not going to die. The alt media just needs to get real, get out of the dollar, and just simply have a gateway that allows them at some point to turn those cryptos that their fans are sending to them into dollars to pay rent, buy groceries, that sort of thing. But I wouldn't store any kind of wealth at all in dollars. And cryptos are truly the route to go with this stuff. And the transmission is simple, global. You can use Litecoin. It's extremely fast. It's very cheap. Litecoins are about $40 each. So it's a very good vehicle for funding fractional payments. You want to send somebody $10, it's only send them a quarter of a Litecoin, that sort of thing. And so I am actually surprised, or I'm not surprised, but I would have thought that many of the alt media people would also be looking around in the general greater environment to say, okay, what's out there for me? But unfortunately, their paradigm is structured around the same metric as the rest of society, the U.S. dollar and other fiat currencies. And so there we go. But if they just simply get these addresses and open up their minds, there's many services out there now. Coin payments is one, BitPay, all different kinds of things that will allow people to accept or to send currency to a redirector. And those could be cut off. You could have somebody at Coin Payments decide that they don't like you and they would cut you off. Not that they would do this. I'm just saying that they could. But they would have to actually be able to, they'd have to root around to find your account for one, because it's all based on these anonymous hash codes. And then for two, they would have to decide that they wanted to mess with that. And I don't think that they would in any event. But nonetheless, you wouldn't need to do it if you wanted to manage your own cryptos. But I'm saying even if you didn't want to do that, there's services out there that would collect it for you for a small fee, a little tiny fraction of an Ether or a Litecoin. And so you're good, and you just, like I said.
Overall, though, the mainstream media they're dying. That's part of the dollar system.
That is a major support for the dollar system. I always figured it was the military-industrial complex, the control of the political structure, and the media. The legal side I didn't see as being a central pillar because they just do what they're told to do fundamentally. And so the political system is the legal system. So this little tripod, and once one of those legs goes, and see, that's why our military industrial complex is in a world of hurt. They need to steal trillions of dollars every couple of years to support these special access projects and the secret space program. And the ability to steal those trillions of dollars is really diminishing as people remove their wealth from the dollars and deflate that envelope. And then in addition to that, as the media fails, their ability to cover up these thefts and the corruption that is required for them fails. And thus I say our military might be good for one major engagement in one war, in a major war, but that would be it. It would be a 9-minute war. And the new technologies in use in China and Russia would overwhelm our electronics, and then there you go. For instance, our recent crash of the was it the Fitzgerald or whatever boat in Japan? That was a directed energy thing. So they got scrambled. It wasn't like they're a manufacturing error or any of that. It was like somebody sent them a message, aimed a little beaming device at them, and let go with it. And we know that this has been going on since World War I. Okay, so in World War I, at the very end of World War I, when Germany was a defeated power, pilots flying from France to Poland or France to any place would fly over this one region in Germany, and their planes would cut out, their engines would cut out, they'd have to glide down, and they kept searching and searching and searching, and the German government denied completely any knowledge of what was going on. And we don't know if that's true or not, but we do know that they were working on directed energy weapons long before even World War II. And they were very successful at it in the dealing with the airplanes and so on in the World War I period of time. So those energy beaming weapons, if you start looking into the patents and stuff, you find people are now able to do tight beam. They've got patents for tight beam radar. And so they're talking about being able to send a radar beam that does not spread out, sort of like a laser in radar. That kind of thing is certainly an element of what these ships and airplanes and stuff are starting to experience globally. And it's going to get worse for them.
And the dollar, would you say by the end of 2018 the dollar's toast? We're not even going to be using it?
No. The dollar will stick around until probably the end of the 2020s. But at some point we'll cross a threshold, like I say, where there will be a significant majority, and I think it's around 10%. Okay, here's the deal. The revolution of the United States from Britain as it's an uncompleted act as far as I'm concerned. We're not done with that. But that war occurred because 3% of the population decided that they wanted to have nothing to do with Britain and we needed to get out. Only 3%. So we've got slightly over 1% in cryptocurrencies in a broader sense now of a particular technical class. We haven't even hit 1% of mainstream. And as we cross from 1% to 3% in the mainstream in cryptos, we'll be getting to a point where we're starting to actually have visible around you all the time evidence that there's an emerging economy. By the time we reach 10%, those people that are uncrypto aware now will really let me put it this way, the herd will move at 10%. And then it'll take us years to get the majority of the population all converted over to cryptos. But once we're in 10%, the government starts dying. The dollar is effectively not a concern to anybody. It's a temporary inconvenience you have to deal with to pay your electric bill. But once we're at 3%, it's totally irrevocable. We can't ever go back. And I think we're shading towards that this year.
Clif High, halfpasthuman.com, the new report, we don't know exactly what the dial is, but I'm going to call it Cryptos, Finances, and Politics, oh my. But that'll be on the front page of halfpasthuman.com, halfpasthuman.com. Just go to the page, scroll down, you'll find the latest report. It's coming out. Clif High, thanks for joining us today. Very interesting. I mean, I know it was interesting when I stopped taking notes. I'm sitting there listening to you, and I'm like, I stopped taking notes. But anyway, thank you for taking us to school. Very interesting work you do. Very predictive. Very, very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Glad to, Greg. Anytime. It's so much fun.